So you would suggest when you pull out to let the Civil War take place without any intervening?
No, not at all. What you do, as you pull out, you re-engage diplomatically, as we have started to do. The administration is finally having conversations with Iran. You re-engage diplomatically with Jordan and Syria, where a lot of the Iraqi refugees are. You re-engage with Saudi Arabia. You get them to pay for some of the reconstruction in Iraq that needs to take place. You work with Iran, and this is having some success because they're not shipping in these particularly lethal roadside bombs that they used to. We're having some success talking with Iran. That's how you do this. You don't just turn around and walk away. Not at all. You have to redouble your diplomatic effort. You hopefully have enough sense to re-engage Russia in a productive way, because Russia has a lot of influence with Iran. And but that's the strategy. It's not at all about just sort of taking our troops out and walking away.
Okay, let's turn to health care. It is known that you support universal health care for the nation. Would you, as a U.S. Senator, propose a bill laying out terms for universal health care?
Either a bill of my own or work with others to develop a bill. No, absolutely. And when you look at the plans proposed by the three principal Democratic presidential candidates, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and John Edwards, they all have plans that represent the kind of fundamental reform that we have to have. And all of them are aimed at holding down costs and covering more people. Those two are not necessarily inconsistent, but it's a complex area and it takes a lot of work. And the one way to hold down costs is to make sure that people who don't have health insurance today, who can't buy it in the private marketplace, and this is mostly the small business community, they have an option to buy into a national plan, a lot like Medicare, with therefore the lower costs that Medicare has. And we would be pooled in one big pool instead of trying to be part of the very small pool that their individual company might be, whether there are 10 employees or 50 employees or even 100. So once you have a larger pool and a public plan beside the private plans, that will create incentives to hold down the cost in the private plans. This is a fundamentally very serious issue for our economy, because, every small businessman and woman I talk to in Maine, almost without exception, is extremely worried about the cost of their health care. And the cost has just kept going up. And when I was on the board of directors for my law firm many years ago, we were struggling with the same issue. The rest of the developed world has health care plans that cover everybody, that produce better results than ours, and cost about 2/3 of what ours cost. This doesn't mean we want a German system or a British system or a Canadian system or a Japanese system. It just means we want a uniquely American system that costs less and covers everyone. And we get there in part by providing the kind of coverage we have as federal employees.
Well, let's talk about cost. Senator Hillary Clinton's proposed $110 billion health care reform plan. How much would an estimated bill cost that you would support for health care?
Oh, I don't know. But there'll be a cost.
Right.
There'll be a cost. But we can afford it. We can afford it because we're spending $10 billion a month now in Iraq that we shouldn't have to keep spending.
Okay.
We can afford it because people in the upper, if you look at people who earn $1 million a year, people who earn $10 million a year, they have tax cuts, they have revenues coming to them.
Right.
They got, they were the big beneficiaries of the Bush administration. And if those tax cuts were not extended for those, very, very, very rich people, you'd wind up with some other money. Plus, there are other ways to save. And we will only do health care reform when we can figure out how to pay for it. We are simply not going to do it, just adding it to the national debt and adding to the burden that people your age wind up paying in added interest on the national debt. We don't have to do that, and we shouldn't.
Turning now to the economy, along those lines, would you support removing those tax breaks to people that make over a certain X amount of dollars, $1 million?
Well, here's what I would say. I've voted for who knows, probably $1 trillion of tax breaks, and I support increased tax cuts for the middle class. Particularly expanding the child credit, making sure we keep that bottom rate, which used to be 15%, down to 10%. I voted to make sure there's no marriage penalty, and their additional tax breaks for the middle class are warranted because everybody's kind of struggling to get by. At the upper end, we really wind up with a choice. Do we provide, on the one hand, broader health care for people who can't afford to buy it from private insurance companies today? Or do we allow people making $10 million a year to retain the breaks that they were given by the Bush administration? I think that choice is clear. I mean, I really think that choice is clear. We have to do something for the middle class dealing with health care. And I don't know whether it's 10 million or 1 million or what it is, or something, or 500,000 a year, but there has to be a place where we simply don't continue the breaks they got in 01 and 03, and we come back and divert that money to supporting health insurance for the middle class.
Some Republicans believe that if you give tax breaks to wealthy Americans, there'll be a trickle effect in the economy. Do you believe in that trickle effect?
No, and that is disproven.
Okay.
The supply side economists who are now a minority in the economics world, the profession of economics. And you can see it in what happened during the Reagan era and also what happened here. During the Clinton administration, especially the second term, all boats were rising. Lower income people, middle income people, and wealthier people were all doing better. This has changed dramatically under the Bush administration, and that burden, the fact that the middle class is doing not as well as it did before. We've had the biggest tax cuts in American history, and the middle class is losing ground. Average household income is going down. You just saw yesterday the jobs were, the increase in jobs was the smallest in years. Our economy is in trouble. You've had an expansion, but the middle class wasn't part of it. And if trickle-down worked, some of the benefits would have trickled down, but they haven't. And I think that the people who pushed that theory have really now would find it pretty hard to explain why the middle class lost so much ground during a period when the economy was growing.
What would you do to bring jobs here to Maine and to build Maine's economy?
Yeah, always the fundamental question. I mean, this. I've been talking with some of these independent. I've been to 2 meetings with the independent truckers here, who are just desperate because for them, the price of diesel has gone up so much that they're parking their trucks. They're right on the edge of bankruptcy, and they may well go under. And there are families like that all across Maine. Here's what I've been doing in Congress. Number one, I helped to create the House Oceans Caucus, and that group has been a vehicle not only to learn more about the oceans and help other members of Congress understand it, but it's also allowed us to boost funding for marine-related research. And so the Gulf of Maine Research Institute in Portland now has world-class scientists. It got its start through federal funds that I and other members of the delegation got. We got money to the Darling Center at the University of Maine. We got money to Bigelow Labs. There's money to the University of New England. All of that, I think, has been helpful because when you have a healthy research and development activity in a particular state, that leads to increases in jobs. And then, but beyond just getting funds in, it is very important to look, because the middle class, the small business community is the community that generates most of the new jobs here and across the country. That's the group we ought to be focusing on. And I have legislation that would provide help give middle class businesses who are dependent on oil, petroleum products, a tax break for a couple of years so they can get through this particular difficult period. And by and large, we have to go back to what worked in the 1990s. Investing in education You know, the administration passed No Child Left Behind and then started to flat fund education. Well, that drives up property taxes in Maine. It makes it puts the burden more on the states. And, you know, your generation, Justin, your generation is going to go into a world where if we don't do something, jobs are scarcer, it's more expensive to get, you know, the kind of graduate education you may need after college.
Right.
And in many ways, for people who used to go into some of the trades, that seems to be harder too. Now in York County, you've got, you know, the metal trades employers have done a lot of good work with the community college system and with some of the high schools to help students who are inclined toward some of the trades, some of the machine working trades, to find, both get the experience and find jobs afterwards.